Hello guys, welcome to my channel HFI Old Stories. Don't forget like, comment, share this video.
The ship was already burning when Queen Sylara crossed the threshold of the human vessel. Her silver robes shredded at the hem, her crown cracked down the middle. There was no ceremony, no herald, no procession of 10,000 elven soldiers who had once followed her banner across 3 star systems. Those soldiers were gone. Their names were ash now, and the ash was somewhere behind her in the dark, where the Vorath fleet had finished what it started. The airlock hissed shut at her back. She stood in a metal corridor that smelled of engine grease and recycled air and something cooking, something that was almost definitely not elven cuisine. Lights buzzed overhead, ugly and yellow. The walls were a flat gray, marked with dents and scorch lines that no one had bothered to repair. And everywhere she looked, she saw the evidence of a people who fixed what broke and ignored what did not kill them. 2 humans stepped into the corridor. The first was a woman, compact and brown-skinned, with close-cropped hair and the kind of posture that suggested she had spent most of her life being the person in the room who made the final call. Her jacket had no rank insignia. Her eyes took in the Queen the way a mechanic looks at an engine that has failed in an interesting way. The second was a man, taller, with a jaw that looked like it had been broken at least once and healed slightly wrong. He held a compact rifle at a low ready, not pointed at her, but not pointed at her either. The woman said, "You the elf queen we picked up a distress ping from?" Sylara had lived for 412 years. She had addressed parliaments. She had signed treaties in ink made from starlight. She had spoken in the presence of the ancient ones of the outer rings, who communicated in frequencies that shook stone. She said, "Yes." "How many aboard your vessel?" "None." The woman and the man exchanged a look that Sylara could not fully read. Humans were like that. They communicated enormous amounts of information with the smallest movements of their faces. It was, she had always thought, slightly unsettling. "Come on," the woman said. "I'm Captain Dani Osei. That's Sergeant Clay Barker. We'll get you cleaned up and then you're going to tell me everything." Sylara followed. She had no other direction to go. The Vorath had come to the elven home cluster 9 days ago. Not with negotiations, not with demands, not with the slow diplomatic pressure they had applied for the past 30 years, the threats and the border violations and the trade strangulations. They had come with something new. A weapon the elven intelligence networks had not believed was possible. A resonance pulse that interfered with the quantum lattices underpinning elven ship drives at a molecular level. Every elven vessel in the home cluster had gone silent within 40 seconds. 40 seconds. Sylara had been aboard the command ring of the station above the homeworld when it happened. She had felt it as a vibration in her sternum, a wrongness, before any of her instruments confirmed what she already knew. She had watched through the observation windows as 47 warships drifted dark and cold against the stars like scattered stones. The evacuation pods had still worked. They were simple enough, mechanical enough, that the resonance pulse did not touch them. She had launched what she could launch. She had stayed until she could not stay. She had taken a single scout craft running on chemical propulsion, slow and loud and bright. And she had burned for the edge of the cluster, while behind her, the Vorath began the systematic reduction of everything she had ever built. The distress signal had been a gamble. She had not known there was a human vessel in range. She had not known there was any vessel in range. Captain Dani Osei did not look like salvation. She looked like a woman who was calculating logistics. That, Sylara was beginning to think, might be exactly the same thing. The briefing room was small and smelled of cold coffee. A screen covered one wall. Osei pulled up a star map with the efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times. and Sylara felt the breath leave her body when she saw the cluster. The Vorath formation. The coverage. "Walk me through it," Osei said. "Everything you know. Every capability, every blind spot, every piece of intel your people had on them before it went sideways. Talk slow. I'll be taking notes." Sylara looked at the captain. She looked at Barker in the corner, rifle now slung, arms crossed, watching with his broken jaw face and his careful eyes. She thought about what she had lost. She thought about the names of the dead, which she was already rehearsing because it was the duty of the last queen to remember the names of the last soldiers. She thought about a home cluster that was burning right now, in this moment. While she sat in this ugly gray room, she thought about what it meant that a human captain, on a vessel that looked like it had been repaired so many times it was essentially a new ship built from the bones of old ones, had not asked a single question about territory or politics or what the elves would owe humanity in exchange for rescue. Just, "Walk me through it. I'll take notes." "The resonance pulse," Sylara said. "I will start there." She talked for 3 hours. Osei took notes and interrupted with precise questions. Not the questions of a person trying to understand a situation, but the questions of a person already building a response to one. Barker stayed in the corner and said almost nothing, but twice he leaned forward and asked something short and technical. And both times Osei immediately followed up on it, which told Sylara something about the actual architecture of authority in this room. At the end, Osei leaned back and looked at the star map. "Okay," she said. Sylara waited. "We're going to need more ships." Sylara almost laughed. The sound that came out was not quite a laugh. "You have 1 ship?" "Yeah," Osei said. "Right now I do." She reached out and tapped the communications panel. "Barker, get me a channel to the Meridian. And then get me Fleet Command. And then get me Admiral Grove, even if she's asleep, especially if she's asleep." Barker unfolded from his corner and moved to the panel. He moved quickly. He did not ask why. Osei looked back at Sylara. "We have 43 vessels within 2 days' hard burn. That's the ones I can call in without authorization. With authorization, probably double that. The Vorath don't know human ship drives run on a completely different quantum architecture, which means the resonance pulse doesn't touch us." Sylara stared at her. "We've been watching the Vorath for 11 years, Osei continued. "We've been watching them build that weapon. We didn't know when they'd use it. We thought we had more time." She paused. "I'm sorry we didn't warn you sooner. That's on us. That's something we're going to have to carry." The lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the ship, someone dropped something metal, and it rang and rang. "Why?" Sylara said. "Why do you carry that? The Elven Council never allied with humanity. We declined your trade agreements 3 times. Our border patrol fired on your survey ships twice in the last decade." Osei was quiet for a moment. "Because you're people," she said. "And they're burning your home." She said it the way Barker had asked his technical questions. Simply, without weight or theater, as if it required no more justification than that. Sylara looked at the star map. She looked at the Vorath formation, the methodical geometric coverage that meant someone had planned this for a very long time. She looked at the empty space where the Elven fleet had been 47 ships. 40 seconds. Ash. She thought about 43 human vessels beginning a hard burn toward the cluster. She thought about a queen without a crown, in a gray room that smelled of cold coffee, watching a human captain pick up a communications channel like she was ordering supplies. "Tell me about your weapon systems," Sylara said. Osei smiled. It was a short, sharp thing, and It changed her whole face. "Now that," she said, "is a conversation I was hoping we'd get to." The first thing Dani Osei did when she got off the channel with Admiral Grove was walk to the galley and pour herself a cup of coffee that was thick enough to stand a spoon in. She drank half of it standing at the counter with her back to the corridor, giving herself exactly 90 seconds of quiet. Then she went back to work. The Elf Queen was in the briefing room reviewing the tactical files Osei had unlocked for her, moving through the data the way Osei imagined someone moved through the rooms of a destroyed house, carefully, looking at everything and touching nothing. Barker was in engineering running a pre-burn diagnostic. The rest of the crew, 14 people on a ship sized for 20, were doing what they did, which was keeping a 20-year-old vessel functional through a combination of skill and stubbornness that Osei had long since stopped being amazed by. She had 16 hours before the first ships arrived to form up. She had used 10 minutes of that time to feel the weight of what was coming. 10 minutes was enough. The Vorath were a problem she had been tracking in the back of her mind for 3 years. Not officially. No one had asked her to. She had simply looked at the data coming in from the border regions, at the way the Vorath moved and what they left behind when they moved. And she had started building a mental model of an opponent who was systematic, patient, and willing to accept enormous costs in pursuit of a long-term geometric goal. The resonance weapon was not a surprise to her. What had surprised her was the timeline. She had thought 3 more years, maybe 5. 9 days was a lot less than 3 years. She pulled up the technical readouts Sylara had given her on the pulse weapon. The Queen had described it from observation, from the way it had hit, from what the instruments in the station had registered in the 40 seconds before everything went quiet. It was not complete data. It was better than nothing. Osei's engineering lead, a compact man named Pete Galvez, who was missing the top joint of his left index finger from an incident no one talked about, appeared at her elbow. "You've seen the resonance data," Osei said. It was not a question. "Yeah," Pete said. "Ran it through the drive model. It wouldn't touch us. Different quantum signature like you thought. But our weapons use elven-derived targeting systems. We bought the license 8 years ago, refitted the Meridian and 6 other ships. That targeting architecture might be vulnerable." Osei set down her coffee. How vulnerable? Unknown. Could be completely fine. Could be we fire and nothing happens. Could be something in between. Pete paused. "I won't know until I've had more time with the data." "You have 16 hours. I know. Do you need the Queen?" Pete looked down the corridor toward the briefing room. "Yeah, probably. She'd know things we don't about the targeting lattice. I'll send her your way." Pete left. Osei picked her coffee back up. She looked at the star map projected on the wall screen, the Vorath formation, the coverage zones, the response geometry she had been building in her head since the distress ping had come in 4 hours ago. The Vorath had made a mistake. She was not certain they knew they had made it yet. The mistake was not the weapon. The weapon was good. The weapon had done exactly what it was designed to do. The mistake was the assumption embedded in the design that all advanced spacefaring civilizations used similar drive architectures. That if you built a weapon to strike at the quantum foundations of faster-than-light travel, you struck at everyone. Humans had arrived at faster-than-light travel by a completely different route. They had not built on elven theory or on the mathematical frameworks the Vorath themselves used. They had stumbled into it sideways, through a materials science discovery in the 2090s that nobody had expected. And the resulting drive architecture was, at a fundamental level, a completely different language. The resonance pulse was a dictionary. Humans did not speak that language. This was only useful, Osei thought, if you used it correctly. And using it correctly meant moving fast before the Vorath had time to realize the hole in their plan. 43 ships in 16 hours. She walked to the briefing room. Sylara was still at the data terminal, moving through weapons schematics with an expression that was not quite readable, but which Osei was starting to learn. It was the expression of someone who was translating grief into usefulness, which was the only kind of grief that did anything for anyone. "I need you to work with my chief engineer," Osei said. "You're targeting lattice architecture. He needs to know if it's vulnerable to the pulse." Sylara looked up. "If our targeting systems are on human vessels, the pulse might affect your weapons even if your drives are immune." "That's what Pete thinks. He needs your help to find out." The Queen stood up. She moved the way Osei's grandmother had moved, a woman who had spent 40 years as a cargo hauler and developed the economy of motion that comes from living in tight spaces. No wasted movement. Nothing performed. "Where is your engineer?" Sylara said. Osei showed her. She watched Pete and Sylara begin to talk, watched the two of them settle into the immediate shared language of people who understand that a technical problem is a technical problem, and feelings about the situation are a separate file to open later. She went back to planning. The Vorath formation had a specific shape. She had looked at it for a long time. It was designed to prevent escape, or to create overlapping coverage that pushed anything trying to flee toward a narrow corridor. And then that corridor ended at a Vorath deep strike fleet. It was elegant. It was the geometry of people who had thought about this for a very long time. But it was static. It was designed for a prey that was already disabled, already drifting, already quiet. It was not designed for an approach from outside the cluster. 43 ships, human drives that the pulse could not touch. And the Vorath looking inward at the wreckage, not outward at the dark. Osei drew the approach vector on the screen. She stared at it for a long time. Then she called Barker. "I need you to build me a firing solution," she said. "The pulse weapon. Wherever it's being broadcast from, there's a ship, a platform, something. Find it. If we can take out the transmitter before the Vorath realize we're there. Every elven drive that's just gone dormant starts back up." Barker was quiet for a moment. The Queen mentioned the fleet went dark, not destroyed. "Yes." "So those ships are still there. 47 warships, crews intact, just sitting quiet, waiting for power." "Yes." Another pause. How fast can elven ships reinitialize a drive from cold dormant? Osei thought about this. She went to the door of engineering. "Sylara." The Queen looked up from the schematic she was studying with Pete. "If we took out the pulse transmitter, drive reinitialization from full dormant, how long?" Sylara's expression shifted. Something moved behind her eyes that was not hope exactly, but was the shape hope makes before it is allowed to fully form. 40 seconds to partial. 3 minutes to combat ready. Osei looked at Barker on the screen. "Find me that transmitter," she said. Barker nodded and was already gone. Osei walked back to her star map. 43 human ships, 16 hours. One transmitter somewhere in the Vorath formation, broadcasting a frequency that had disabled 47 elven warships. She picked up her coffee and found it had gone cold. She drank it anyway. The transmitter was not a ship. Barker found this out 7 hours into his search, using every passive sensor the ship had, running the data through 3 different analytical models, and then sitting very still for 2 minutes before he called Osei. "It's an installation," he said. built into the third moon of the fourth planet in the cluster. They must have placed it years ago. It's not broadcasting from space. It's embedded in the rock. Osei looked at the readout he sent her. She looked at it for a long time. That's not something you build during an invasion, she said. No. They built it before. Years before. Minimum. Probably longer. Barker paused. They planned this in advance. This wasn't a response to something the elves did. This was always the plan. Osei set the readout down. She looked at the star map. She thought about the shape of the Vorath formation again, the inward-facing geometry of it. They expected the elves to surrender, she said slowly. Look at the formation. It's not positioned to fight a defense. It's positioned to manage a capitulation. They expected to fire the pulse, disable everything, and then the elves would have no choice. And then us showing up is not in their plan at all. No, because they don't know we have ships in range. Our closest military installation is 30 light minutes outside sensor range of their coverage zone. They might not even know we're a factor. Barker was quiet. She could hear him thinking. Barker thought loudly, in the sense that his silences had a particular texture when he was working something out. If we can take out that installation, he said finally, before they see us coming. The elven fleet comes back online, 47 warships, and then the Vorath are suddenly facing a problem they did not plan for. Sylara appeared in the doorway behind Osei. She had heard. Of course she had heard. The ship was not large. Osei turned to look at her. The installation is in the moon, Osei said. We can crack the surface. We have ordnance that can do it. But we need an exact location of the transmitter housing, and we need to know what the rock will do to our sensor readings. I know that, Moon, Sylara said. There was something in her voice that was controlled the way a fire is controlled when you are holding both hands flat on top of it. I know the geological surveys. I can give you the subsurface map. Will the rock scatter our strike? Not if you hit the northern polar cavity. There is a natural chamber 80 meters below the surface. If they built there, which the sensor profile suggests they did, the cavity will focus the strike rather than scatter it. Osei looked at Barker on the screen. You got that? Building the solution now, Barker said. I need 43 ships in strike formation in 9 hours, Osei said. The formation has to come in from the far side of the cluster's star. The Vorath sensors will be partially blinded by the radiation. Partial blind is not full blind. No, so we move fast. We hit the transmitter, we pull back to the rally point, and we wait for 47 elven warships to remember they exist. She looked at Sylara. I need you on comms when those ships come back online. Your people are going to wake up in the middle of a battlefield, and they are going to need a voice they recognize. Sylara was very still for a moment. My people are going to wake up, she said. If this works, yes. The Queen's expression moved through several things in rapid succession. Osei watched it happen and did not look away, because it seemed wrong to look away from something that significant. Someone learning that the dead might not be dead, that the ash might not be ash. They will recognize my voice, Sylara said. Her voice was steady. It was the kind of steady that was not natural, that had been made, that was being maintained by will. Good, Osei said, because I need them ready to fight the second they're up. We're going to have maybe 90 seconds between the transmitter going dark and the Vorath realizing what happened. In that 90 seconds, everything changes or nothing does. Pete appeared beside Sylara. Drive solution checks out, he said. Targeting lattice is clean. The pulse doesn't hit our systems at all. We're good to fire. Good. Osei looked at her crew, at her engineer missing a finger, at her sergeant who asked good questions quietly, at the elf queen who was holding herself together with the particular care of someone who knew exactly how much was riding on the next few hours. 9 hours, she said. Let's get ready. At the 90-minute mark before the strike, Admiral Grove's fleet came out of hard burn at the rally point, and the comms channel opened and Grove's voice came through, dry and flat and familiar, saying, "Osei, I leave you alone for 5 minutes." "Admiral," Osei said. "Briefing, now." Osei briefed her. Grove listened without interrupting, which was how Osei knew the Admiral understood the shape of the thing immediately. Grove only interrupted when she did not understand. When she understood, she was silent and still, processing, and when Osei was finished, she said, "Transmitter in the moon." "Yes, Admiral." "Formation approach behind the star." "Yes, Admiral." 90-second window." "Yes, Admiral." Grove was quiet for a moment. "You built this whole plan with one ship." "I had help," Osei said. She looked at Sylara across the briefing room. Grove said, "I'm assuming tactical command of the fleet formation. You're on point for the strike itself. You know the approach. The Elf Queen stays on your ship, on your comms. I want her voice to be the first thing those elven crews hear." That was my plan. Of course it was. Another pause. Osei, the Vorath couldn't have built that installation without people on the ground for years. We're talking about infiltration of the cluster at a level that means they had agents walking around among the elves for a long time. I know. That means the elves have a security problem on top of everything else. I know. That's going to be complicated. Yes, Admiral. One problem at a time. Grove made a sound that was not quite a laugh. One problem at a time. Get me that transmitter. The channel closed. Osei looked at Sylara. The Queen was looking at the star map, at the formation, at the moon where the machine that had silenced her world was buried 80 meters under rock. "Agents," Sylara said. "Inside the cluster. For years." "We can work through that later," Osei said. "I know." The Queen paused. "I am not falling apart." "I know you're not. I just want to be clear about that." "Crystal clear." "Your Majesty." Sylara looked at her. Something moved in her expression. It might have been the beginning of something that was not grief, not yet, but was at least the shape a different thing might eventually make. "You are a strange kind of person," Sylara said. "So I've been told," Osei said. She turned back to the tactical display. 61 ships now, human and crewed, arranged in the approach geometry she had sketched on a screen 8 hours ago. One moon, one transmitter, one 90-second window. Barker's voice came through the ship channel. "Strike solution locked. Ready on your mark." "Stand by," Osei said. She looked at the clock. She looked at the formation. She looked at the star, vast and indifferent, throwing radiation in all directions, providing exactly the cover she needed. She picked up the comms unit and opened the channel to the fleet. "All ships," she said. "This is Captain Osei on the Meridian. In 60 seconds we begin the approach. Strike on my mark. After the transmitter falls, hold position and wait for my signal. We are guests in someone else's home today. We behave accordingly." She paused. "Mark in 60. She put the comms unit down. The clock ran. The transmitter fell in a single strike. One ship, Osei's ship, point of the formation, firing a shaped charge penetrator that hit the northern polar cavity of the moon at the coordinates Sylara had pulled from memory. And 80 meters of rock did exactly what Sylara had said it would do. Focused to the detonation inward, into the chamber, into the installation, into the machine that had spoken a frequency across the cluster for 9 days and told every elven drive to forget what it was. The frequency stopped. Osei was watching the sensor display. She counted. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then, across the cluster, 47 lights came on. Not slowly, not one by one. All at once, as if someone had reached into the dark and turned on every switch at the same moment. 47 elven warships, cold and dormant for 9 days, drawing power, cycling systems, drives beginning the 40-second initialization sequence. Sylara, Osei said. Now. The Queen was already at the comm station. She opened the channel on the frequency Osei's technical crew had isolated, the elven military band, and she spoke. She did not give a speech. There was no time for a speech. She said, "This is Queen Sylara. You are alive. Human allies have struck the Vorath transmitter. Your drives are reinitializing. In 3 minutes, you are combat ready. The human fleet holds position at Sector 9 of the formation. Do not fire on them. Weapons to Vorath targets only. Acknowledge." The channel exploded. Voices, dozens of them overlapping, and Osei did not speak Elven well enough to follow everything. But she heard the shape of it, the texture of people who had been sitting in dark and silence for 9 days, suddenly receiving confirmation that they existed, that someone knew where they were, that the world had not ended while they were unconscious. 47 acknowledgments came through in 88 seconds. The Vorath formation began to react at 91 seconds. Too late. Osei watched the display with the focused attention of someone who has planned something and is now watching to see if reality agrees. The Vorath ships turned, reoriented, sensors sweeping. They had been looking inward. They were now trying to look outward and inward simultaneously. And the mathematics of that was bad for them, because the elven fleet was inside their formation and the human fleet was outside it. And the Vorath had designed their coverage for exactly the opposite problem. The battle lasted 22 minutes. Osei would later describe it, when people asked her, as less like a battle and more like the moment when you realize the puzzle you have been struggling with is actually upside down. The Vorath had built something magnificent and intricate. It simply had not been built for what was actually happening. 17 Vorath vessels were destroyed. The rest scattered into individual jump trajectories and were gone. The cluster was quiet. The elven fleet sat in the dark, 47 ships with power and crews and no planet to go home to, because the planet was still down there under the orbital paths with 9 days of Vorath occupation to assess and process, and whatever that would turn out to mean. But the ships were there. Osei exhaled. Barker appeared in the doorway of the bridge. He looked at the display. He looked at the 47 lights, where before there had been nothing. "Huh," he said. "Yeah," Osei said. Sylara was still at the comm station. She was not talking anymore. She was listening to the voices on the channel, all of them at once. Her people talking to each other across the dark, alive and confused, and starting to be angry, which Osei suspected was a healthy sign. "What happens now?" Barker said. He meant it as a logistical question. "Now we go in and help with the recovery," Osei said. "Ground situation on the homeworld is unknown. Vorath may have left assets. Population will need support: medical, food, engineering." She pulled up the logistics projection she had started building 4 hours ago. Grove is already coordinating with Command for supply convoy authorization. "And the Queen?" Osei looked at Sylara. The Queen had her eyes closed. She was listening to the voices. Her expression was the expression of someone receiving something they had believed they would never receive. and the receiving of it was not simple or clean, but was enormous and heavy and completely necessary. She goes home, Osei said, when it's ready for her. Will it be ready for her for a while? No, Osei said, but she'll go anyway. That's what queens do. Barker considered this. What about the infiltration thing? The agents? We'll work on it. That's a mess. Yes. Could take years to untangle. Probably. Barker was quiet for a moment. So, we're going to be in this for a while. Barker, Osei said, we were already in it. We just didn't say so out loud yet. He nodded slowly. He picked up her cold coffee from the console and handed it to her and went back to his station. Osei drank the coffee. It was terrible. She did not care. The lights on the display held their positions, 47 elven ships and 61 human ones. Arranged not by plan now, but by the simple fact of being in the same place at the same time for reasons that had started with a distress ping and a captain who took notes. Sylara opened her eyes. She looked at Osei across the bridge. My people want to know who to thank, she said. Tell them it was a joint operation, Osei said. They want a name. Osei thought about this. Tell them it was Meridian. Sylara was quiet. Then she turned back to the channel and spoke. And Osei heard the word Meridian in the middle of the elven. The only word she recognized, standing out in the stream of sounds, like a fixed star. The cluster held 47 lights. The lights held. Outside, in the dark beyond the reach of every sensor, the Vorath were regrouping, assessing, rebuilding their model of a galaxy that had not behaved the way they had planned for. They would be back. Osei knew that the way she knew cold coffee tasted bad, it was simply true. But that was a problem for later. Right now, the lights were on. Right now, that was enough.